Joining me today is the Eisner-nominated comic book creator behind titles like Luther Strode and the New World over at Image Comics, Silver Surfer Black, and Doctor Strange Fall Sunrise at Marvel, along with an abundance of other prolific work, both inside and out of comics. It is my absolute honor to welcome Trad Moore onto the Oblivion Bar Podcast.
Hello.
Trad, what an honor, man. It's honestly, we talked a little bit before the recording here, and I sort of buttered you up already, and I'm going to do my best not to do that during the actual recording part, but it really honestly means so much to get you here on the show. And the fact that, I think it's known among a lot of our listenership and just in the comic world that you don't often do a lot of, these type of interviews. So it just means a lot, and I'm happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'll butter you up a little bit too. It's always fun getting that email from someone and when they ask if you want to do a thing, and then I get to go down the rabbit hole and look at your interviews and do this or that. And I was very impressed with your work, and I'm excited to chat with you.
That's awesome. I'll be feeding off that for the rest of the year. So thank you.
There we go. In the interview. Bye.
That's all I needed. I just used some affirmation, and now we're good. We're fine. We were talking again a little bit before the recording, and I do want to sort of share our shared roots within Savannah, Georgia, where we both spent some time in Southeast Georgia in the early parts of the 2010s, the aughts, as they call them. You were obviously in Savannah, or you were at Savannah College of Art and Design, and I was serving at Fort Stewart while I was in the Army. So, I brought this up in our initial email thread, but I remember being so incredibly green with envy for the students there, the folks that I met while in Savannah, the students that were there at SCAD. And I'll say it just so you don't have to, just for the listeners, SCAD is undeniably one of the premier art schools in the country. And to be surrounded by so many talented, hungry artists, it just sounded like a fantasy land to me. So I want to start with this here. All these years later, with hindsight and everything else, how do you remember your time there in Savannah as a young person learning how to hone your craft?
I loved it. I'm born and raised in Georgia. So when it was time to look for, and I never wanted any other career. I was a specific kid, like straight out the gate. I was like, I want to draw comics. And people were like, oh, so you want to work for this or that, fine art, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I want to draw comic books, and I was like, I loved all the other avenues of art, but that was always my goal. And it was one of the few places in the nation, I think it still is, but at the time, it was one of the few places that offered, sequential art and, animation, cartooning, all that stuff. So it felt like a fantasy world to me as well, Other people in my family are artistic, but none of them ever pursued it as a career. So I didn't have any one to look to, you know what I mean? I just knew that I loved it, and that was what I was going to do no matter what. And yeah, all those people that I went to school with there, a bunch are working professionals now in the comic world. The professors, a bunch of them still are doing the good work over there now, teaching students. I love going over there, meeting students coming up, and yeah, I had a really great time there. I learned a lot. I think that, to have this special little moment where art is your priority, and it's scary, because I remember going there and just thinking like, I'm going to roll up and I'm going to be the worst person here. Like, I remember I had like AP credits from high school, and I rejected them all. I was like, I don't want to come in here with credits. I don't want to come in here with name. I don't want to come in here with nothing, because like I didn't want to be too big for my britches, and end up having all these other students mop the floor with me, So yeah, it was fun to just be in a situation. It felt like athletics, growing up playing soccer. It felt like that, where you're on the same team, but you are, you hold each other accountable by wanting to be at the quality of your friends, And I remember it was always an exciting and kind of scary thing to be given an assignment and then finish it and you have the critique day where everyone's got to post their work on the wall, and
Sure. Yeah.
you're about to just be, crucified in front of everyone, and it was always exciting, where you were kind of like, yo, come at me, let's see what you got. But then part of you was like, don't hurt me. So, um, yeah, love the city, loved my experience there. Yeah, nothing but good things to say about my time there.
Yeah, we were chatting about this both at San Diego and here just a moment ago about how much I absolutely love the city of Savannah. It's easily
Mhm.
my favorite city in the U.S. And obviously I haven't been to every city in the U.S., but nothing but good feelings when I think about my time there. And again, the Army wasn't an ideal time for me as a young person. I joined
Mhm.
right out of high school, but I think I lucked out so incredibly well by getting a chance, by having the chance to go there, to go to Savannah, to leave home for the first time, and just it just so happened that I ended up in Savannah, Georgia. And a lot of listeners here on the podcast know that my best friend slash co-host here on the Oblivion Bar, we
Mhm.
met while we were in Savannah. And I think a lot of my love of different mediums of art and such, I think stems from my time in Savannah because it is so important there, right? Like it is
Yeah.
such a pillar of that community. SCAD, of course, being sort of the shining light of all that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to pick your brain a little bit because we mentioned that, or you mentioned that you've gone back semi recently to sort of host like was it like a class, or was it, you said it wasn't necessarily a seminar, but what was it here recently that you went back to SCAD for?
Yeah, I've gone back a few times. They do one of the best things about the program there is they really connect students, with editorial, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, everybody. They have a big day out there or big weekend called Editors Day where bunch of top-notch editors. That's where I met Axel Alonso the first time. That's where I met Mark Panicia over at Marvel for the first time. That was a lot of editors that I ended up building a career with. I met basically as a child. I don't know if they remembered me later on down the road, but it feels very validating as a young person, to go in there and get like a real critique. You know what I mean? Not from like a friend and not from a teacher who wants what's best for you. It's like
Sure.
these people, you know, don't give a damn about your life and career.
They have no reason to lie to
Yeah,
you.
they're just there to hang out and be in Savannah. You know what I mean? No offense to those editors, but yeah, but then they also have like Artist Day, which is a similar thing. And it was interestingly enough, like that's where I met Sanford Green for the first time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he was already a working professional. And he was like one of the first working professionals I had talked to that, looked at my work and was excited by it. And literally has been in my corner ever since then, and now, we have the same art rep. We do covers for each other, but yeah, to have moments like that, I essentially went there in the same capacity that Sanford used to come through. It's like obviously artists, you may not be able to get someone directly a job, but it sometimes it happens that way. You know what I mean? So yeah, I go there and I meet students and I basically just do like guest teaching classes, little Q&A things. Basically when I go, I just try to encourage them because I see so much talent when I go to those places, but also like so many nerves and so much fear, so much anxiety. And so yeah, when I go, I just try to encourage them because they're very talented and very hungry, and I try to go get out there, you know what I mean? Like make the thing. And yeah, where I can try to connect people to editors, to companies and this or that, just try to, I don't know. I had always imagined uh, in a perfect world, you look at like the history of art, but it's also the history of just teaching people things. Is you have a person in a senior role, and you have someone coming up, you know, learning under them, and that's how we pass our knowledge down. And like I think a lot of times elders in life or in the world have disappointed me or let me down in ways. But when I think of the ones who made a really big impact and who were supportive and life changing, it's like we need that in art. So I enjoy having the opportunity to go be the adult that I wanted to see in adults, at that age.
Sure. Yeah, it's refreshing, I think, when you have someone like yourself who is so decorated in this medium that these folks really want to get to. And it feels almost like, and you can tell me if you see something differently here, and I'm gonna tie this into our question as well, the next question, but like to not just kick the ladder out from underneath you after you climb up it seems like maybe the bare minimum. Like, do you agree with that at all? Or
I do. I think it's one of those things where I don't think that every artist needs to pursue teaching necessarily,
sure,
but I do think that just being a part of culture, you know what I mean? I do think that, like I said, you imagine a perfect world, you would hope that we have caring adults who can help people achieve what they would like to and not see it as a reason to pat themselves on the back or anything like that. Just seeing like this is how we as people survive. This is how we reach greater heights is through that. You know what I mean? Through, building staircases, because,
hmm
the vision being whatever we're doing now in 100 years will seem like child's play to the children of that era, just through walking up the staircase together.
yeah, it's interesting too that I've often found, and this is a saying that I definitely did not create, but they say that you forget what people say, but they remember how you made them feel.
Yeah. Big time.
And that encouragement, a starving artist like these kids that are at SCAD that are about to go off into the real world and look for their own path, they cling on to that either encouragement or piece of advice or even like a critique, right? Like
Mhm.
they will cling on to all of that because you are a walking, talking embodiment of what they're trying to get to at some point. And
Yeah, and I had an experience like that. I went to Dragon Con when I was
mm,
21, maybe 22. Like, I think I might have either had just graduated or I was still in college. And that was an era where Olivier Coipel was the the artist. I mean,
sure.
if you're
Yeah.
looking at the mainstream, he was the hero. And, he was a person who I loved and I was obsessed with his work. And I loved how he drew figures and I was just all about it. And weirdly enough, he was at Dragon Con in Atlanta and I was like, what in the world's Olivier doing here? Um, but I met him and that exact thing that you're saying. I walked up to him with portfolio, all nervous, and he was like, "You can't look at it now, but come back in a little bit." And he pulled me behind the table, sat down with me, gave me a critique, and was really encouraging. And I literally rode that high, like straight into my career. You know what I mean? Where I was like, "Well, if Olivier thinks I got it, then fuck everybody else. I'm ready." you know. Um, and yeah, I still you know, anytime I see his work, beyond being impressed by his, the quality of his art, I'm always like, Olivier, what a hero. Love that guy, you know?
Sure. It's funny. This actually it perfectly transitions me to my next question. And before I get to this question, I do have to set this up by visiting an old friend of ours, I think. And I'm going to go ahead and share a screen with you here, Tread.
See it.
And I apologize if this is kind of loud. I tried to turn it down, but let me know if it's too loud.
In October 5th, Image Comics is coming out with a book called Strange Talent of Luther Strode. I am the artist of this book. It is a 6-issue miniseries. It is about a high school kid, like nerdy, little Peter Parker-esque orders for a lifting kind of Charles Atkinson type ad. He gets the book and it works. And weird things in the series, and the people who associated with the book are actually part of a murder cult trying to get their members. So I always wanted, but turns out that it bites them a little bit in the end. As a short project, yeah. It's, I graduated from the Savannah College of Art and Design 2010, and then just got picked up late 2010, and we've been cracking out ever since. I'm already on in the lead.
So seeing that young version of yourself there, I'm just curious, do you remember that moment? Do you remember that convention? Do you remember that conversation? And actually in more of, I guess, in a more broad sense, do you remember what it's like to sort of have to pitch a story on demand right there in front of a fan or another editor or whomever?
I do. I do. I remember, yeah, that was in like a high school gymnasium in Florida.
Wow.
Um, uh, Shout out to Savannah friend Kevin Ziegler. He was sitting behind
Yeah.
me. He's the one who did the artwork for y'all's podcast.
That's right.
So yeah, we went to that place, and that was, like I said, fresh out of school. I had Luther Strode got picked up. I had done the first 6 pages of that, the pitch. I'm pretty sure Image still functions this way, but you can just send in a blind pitch. You know, we just went. People would be like, "What's the trick? What's the secret sauce you got?" And I'm like, "There ain't no secret sauce. We just went on the website and followed the directions, you know, and got a thumbs up." So yeah, I had done the pitch artwork for that while in school. So that was, yeah, like I said, literally fresh out of the gate. You know, I remember I was selling pages back then for somewhere in the realm of $50 to $100. I was selling
If I
pages.
had a time machine, my
I know.
gosh.
I actually met a guy, or saw a guy again, that I had sold a piece that I had done on that at that show for like $30 to him.
Wow.
And it was, you know, it's funny looking back. Yeah, I try not to do that, you know. But
Sorry then.
you thrown me in front of myself. Yeah, but yeah, all those I do. That's one of the reasons why I don't sketch at shows, because I really want to like invest in people and in experiences, and I do have fond memories and close friends that, you know, were all built from just happenstance meetings at conventions or in travels in this or that. And so I think to be present in those spaces is very important to me. Yeah, they can be a little stressful regardless of your success or lack thereof. And I never thought at that time that that guy holding a camera in my face would somehow that video's got legs. I don't
Yeah.
know what it is about it. It's funny.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite aspects, again, referring to this moment we just sort of relived together, and sort of, I would say, oh my gosh, I mean, following your career for as long as I have, and I feel like I've been following since about Luther Strode on, the evolution of your sequentials is so crazy to me. Again, using Luther Strode as a sort of the basis, and then going all the way to Doctor Strange Fall Sunrise here recently, it's significant. And it definitely, that's not a knock towards Luther Strode. I'm still a big fan of that. But even while rereading like Venom 150 and some of your early work with All New Ghost Rider, it was a fascinating experience to shotgun your entire career in preparation for this conversation again, and just see that progression in real time. And I wanted to ask you, do you have maybe a proper way of describing that evolution? Not just like stylistically, but how you feel emotionally or even philosophically about your work in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, um, I this is both a big and small answer. I think it's just growing up. You
Mm.
know, it was like I started really young, and I do my best to just pour the whole of me into everything I do, but the whole of me changes
Yeah.
pretty regularly. And I'm a very emotional person. I put it all into the project, but usually when I'm done, I am like capital DONE done. Like I never want to look at that fucking thing ever again in my life. I never want to hold that pencil again. I never even want to look in that cardinal direction. So yeah, it's a lot of it. I am cautious to. I feel like I don't want to, what am I trying to say here? I hit very low lows. And I think a lot of times for me, art is me trying to pull myself out of these philosophical or emotional funks. And I think that's why sometimes the work will hit these wild changes. Because, yeah, like I said, I will experience in my life wild changes. And the idea of ever repeating myself or doing the same thing is like disgusting to me. You know what I mean? It's like, I'd rather just quit. I'd rather just grind my teeth on cement. Like, no, I will not do it again. So yeah, it's kind of, it feels like going underwater and screaming to me. That's what, that's what making art feels like. When you go in the ocean and you're just punching waves and just screaming like an animal. That's the art making process for me. I think, hopefully I've gotten a little more, I've gotten better at that aspect of it, of not being like a nightmare or an emotional wreck, you know, in the process of it. But I do think for me that is kind of the process of it, is, you know, hitting a wall creatively or emotionally and just going like, I have no idea what to do next. So I have to either break this wall down or reformat my whole body, break myself down so that I can get around it in some way. I don't always know how to get there, you know, and I think that's why sometimes the art kind of has these massive shifts in it.
Which I love. I think that that's like a hallmark of your career thus far, is the fact that it seems like every new piece that you do, whether it's in comics or not, is different. It's obviously you. You can see it's a Tradmore piece the moment that you see it. But I think, again, going through your entire career here recently in preparation for this conversation, and there were even some that I hadn't read before. I hadn't read that Eddie Brock Venom 150 before. And I think I don't think I vaguely remember the ARF story and Spider-Man, but it was really refreshing to sort of reread it and sort of look at it with new eyes. Because I feel like, and you can tell me maybe where that transition is, and I know you said that you are constantly evolving, but in my brain, it always felt like Silver Surfer Black was like maybe me realizing you've evolved in a very significant way. But doesn't that Spider-Man story actually predates that, correct?
No, that was kind of immediately following.
Okay, gotcha.
It went Silver Surfer, then I had pitched Doctor Strange. I had pitched Fall Sunrise and had gotten the green light, but then lockdown happened, and a bunch of people were furloughed at the big companies at Marvel and DC. So they could kind of only keep their like big books going, you know, the Batmans and the Spider-Mans, and everything else was kind of put on pause. And during that time, that was when I did the Batman Black and White and that Spider-Man short story, because we were basically like, okay, how can we get some cool work in while we see what's going to happen? And then I did those two things, and after that was when I started properly on Fall Sunrise. So yeah, those were good little bite-size things to keep me busy.
Sure. You said something really profound, I think. You know, again, as we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, it's great to get you here because you know, you go to Spotify, you type in Tradmore, and there's like one conversation, and it's with David Harper, our mutual friend over on Off Panel. And you know, shout out to David. Thank you so much, David, for actually helping set this up and connecting Trad and I. And you said something again that really stuck with me. You mentioned you guys were having the conversation about Cormac McCarthy and how he was often breaking rules, and sort of the example of how like coloring inside the lines with proper grammar and punctuation isn't necessarily always the goal for you in your work. And you said, and this is the thing that really struck me, I will take beauty over making sense any day. And I just love that. There was something about that it was like one of those moments where I was listening to the conversation with you and David, and I was still thinking about what you had said, and in like 10 minutes in the conversation had passed, and I hadn't heard anything you guys had said since then. So I was like thinking on that way longer. So I just need to ask you, can you think of maybe a tangible moment in your history or a moment in your past where you first realized that you could confidently, intentionally break those rules in your work and it like makes sense to you?
Yeah, it took a long time. I think that the early years, you're trying to, it's so much learning, it's like with every page of Luther Strode or Ghost Rider, I was learning how to draw. I was like, damn, I don't know how to draw a car. You know what I mean? I don't know how to draw, you know, how do I draw a stool? How do I, like, very basic things, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like, what does crown molding look like in a apartment? You're learning about the whole world, and you're just like a sponge in your teens and 20s, just like seeing the world in a whole different way. And you're like, how the hell do you draw a dog leg? Like, why are they so weird? So yeah, I felt like during that young part of my career, I was just trying to learn, so yeah, I had to, but I really, I wanted to prove myself to myself. But you also want to prove yourself to the world, and it's odd to kind of, it wasn't me, like in the way that maybe like a celebrity grows up, but it's a piece of you that is aging and being critiqued by a very broad audience at a pretty young age, so yeah, it was something that I really wanted to, I wanted to be airtight in my chops, you know what I mean? Like, and then once I got my chops, then I felt like they bored me, where I was like, yeah, I can draw every shingle on that house. I can draw every chain on a chain link fence. But it's like, but why? Why did I do that? I did it first time to see if I could and to see if I liked it. Turns out I can, and I don't like it. So the end. So yeah, a lot of that, and I feel like the most extreme version of that was Legacy of Luther Strode, and Into the New World. I was like, oh no, I will draw everything. And if I draw someone's tongue, I'm going to draw the taste buds. And if I do any of this stuff, it was neurotic. You know what I mean? It was pretty crazy, but it was important to me at the time. So I have no regret. And I think that was when I can look back at those pages and start seeing like, okay, I'm on to something here. But I do think it was with Silver Surfer that it was a fraught time in my life. And interestingly enough, I remember looking at like late era Frank Miller stuff, which I love. I love when he just went off the rails visually.
Are we talking like the Dark Knight Returns or the Dark Knight Strikes Again? Is
yes,
that we're talking
like
about?
I know that one's a contentious one, but I love the look of DK too.
Sure.
Obviously, there was, he's a fascinating career study. But I remember looking at people who really, I kind of either like publicly either pushed themselves or publicly fell apart, in different ways. And I'm like, okay, where's the line here? You know what I mean? How do you, and not uniquely him, but he stood out to me as a pillar of the medium. And I wanted to get there, you know what I mean? Because I was looking at that stuff, and going, I want to draw these giant hands. I kind of want to break some stuff, but I didn't feel like I could do it on the New World because I had already started with this hyper structured thing. But the thing is, I feel like by the end of that book, it fell apart. Not in a bad way. Like, I feel like basically when you get to the last pages of the book, everything looks like it's melting. And it was like, I felt like I was melting. Like, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, literally by the end, none of that was in the script. Like, no one just covered that guy in milk and set him on fire. I was just like, that's how I feel right now. So So yeah, like, and I think it was I went straight from that into Silver Surfer, like barely any time in between. And I think because in that time in my life, I felt like I had nothing to lose. And it was kind of like the pressure of the situation where it was like there was a time pressure, there was financial pressure, there was emotional stuff going on. And I was like, you know what? I am not stopping for 1 second. That's the fastest book I've ever produced by a long shot. And it was like, I just didn't stop to think ever. I basically had like,
Wow.
I had like a couple books that were kind of my like visual Bible for if I had a question. But generally speaking, it was just like it on the page, just pure emotional outpouring where it was like, I'm not doing multiple thumbnails. I'm not doing multiple sketches. Like if it's in my mind, it's on the page, done, next page, next page, next page.
That's an interesting thought exercise. You know what I mean? Like this,
Yeah.
just unabashed, just blunt force, pushing yourself through a book like that. I can't imagine what that
Yeah.
experience was like, but and like you said earlier, you proved that you could do it. And that is something, right? That means something very significant, I think.
Yeah, it was an interesting time because I was relatively new to New York at that time, or I was new to New York. I hadn't even been there a year, I don't think, here. And I was lucky enough at the time to be sharing studio with Cliff Chang and Ivan Brandon. And me and Cliff were just in there all the time, which if you don't know Cliff's work, check it out.
Yeah. And I think folks
Yeah.
that listen to this, hopefully,
I'm
if
sure
you're
they
not
know.
fam-
Yeah, Cliff is as good as they get,
Yeah.
artistically. But he was also just a very at that time in my life, a good person to look to as a human being. You know what I mean? He's enough years my senior, you know what I mean, to where it wasn't like, but not too far. I think maybe there might be like 10 years between us, and we were just side by side. And he's super kind, super efficient, super structured. Just like it would be hard to find a bad thing to say about him, and if someone did, then I'd be side-eyeing that person. Like, I like he's a. What could you possibly say about Cliff? But
They should have done more issues of Paper Girls. Dang it.
Well, and it was funny because yeah, he was working on Paper Girls and wrapping that up while I was working on Silver Surfer Black, and just to have that like consistency in my life at that time was very important to me. The consistency of the book and the consistency of that studio, it was like genuinely like a lifeline at that time, and I think about that time very fondly. We would have stayed in there longer probably because then he had started writing and drawing his Catwoman book as
Yeah.
I was starting to write and draw Fall Sunrise. So it's like we were pitching those books to each other first, prior to their green light and everything. But then, like I said, lockdown time pulled people different directions. But yeah, it was, Silver Surfer was a time. It was a intense time in my life, and I couldn't do it again if I tried. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't try.
If walls could speak, just to be in that studio with you and Cliff. And I'm sorry, who was the third person there in the studio?
Ivan Brandon,
Okay.
writer, a bunch of image books,
Mhm.
verses, and
Yeah.
what's the one with Nick Klein?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, great book. Nick Klein's coolest work, and he has a career of incredible work. But yeah, they're a great team.
That would have been just incredible to just sort of be a fly on the wall to see the three of you masters just working at it. And I wanted to take a step back though, because you said something, again, speaking of profound things, you mentioned something in the comics journal that I wanted to sort of noodle on for a moment. And it was this idea of like measured restraint. And I'm just going to read the quote just for the listener, but I would recommend everybody firstly go read that Comics Journal interview with Trad. It is phenomenal. It was a pillar for me and how I sort of structured this conversation. And I just want to be honest with everybody. That way people know where like my inspiration was. But in terms of this quote here, you say, as for artistic nobility, it comes from honesty, inclusivity, and measured restraint. And then measured restraint, meaning well thought out and intelligently presented, not holding back. If you ever go to a project and think, I'm going to create exactly what I want to, and I'm going to train and study as hard as I can to create it with skill and care, I welcome every single person to experience it. That feels noble to me. That feels respectful, and it makes me it makes me think of a tree, which I love. And again, your inner voice for those responses is my favorite part of that post there from the Comics Journal. So I just want to sort of think about this idea of measured restraint and sort of speak on, if I can have you sort of speak on that idea of measured restraint, and if maybe that was like a secret unlock for you in more recent years in terms of how you've again evolved your style.
Yeah, it was you know, art and life being the same thing for an artist, you know what I mean? But I think that a lot of times, when an artist speaks, I can be a little abstract, you know what I mean? But I do think that it's just like universally relatable, that thought. Again, in the same way as my stylistic growth, I think measured restraint also is like the sign of good parenting. I think that's the sign of good communication in a relationship. You know what I mean? Where you're gonna have these big feelings, and you want to fully express yourself. But I think to be intentional with your words, to be intentional with your lines, to be intentional with your boundaries for yourself of what you will or will not accept, I think that all is like part of maturity. Um, and when you're young, sometimes people have wisdom beyond their years and they have that early on. I struggled with it at times, so I think, and I struggled with it artistically at times and that's part of the fun of being 18. That's part of the fun of being 22. As you say, fuck it, and you set things on fire and you break windows and you scream and it's awesome. And I loved that, but it looks different coming from a 34-year-old, or a 40-year-old. And I think that things lose their novelty. So I think that with Luther Strode, just throwing everything in there, like no restraint, you know what I mean? I just like, no, I'm going to swing this brush, as if it's a whip. Yeah, I think that the measured restraint is, like I said, similar with all that stuff of, I know what I'm capable of. Do I need to scream it? Do I need to show it all the time? No. You know what I mean? Do I need to play the full hand all the time? And I don't think you should. And I think that, yeah, I don't know if there was a moment where it really manifested for me, but I do remember, like, interestingly enough, like, it was when I was working on The New World, and fellow comic artist and just one of my best friends, Ricardo Lopez Ortiz, we were hanging out, sharing work with one another. I can't remember what he was working on at the time, but he's drawn everything from, Batman to independent books to everything. He's great. But he saw like how neurotic I was being on The New World. And like there was a scene where a guy's punching another guy, and I measured out the blood splatter. You know what I mean? And it was like it was all like mathematically done. There was like a geometric.
You're doing like a Dexter thing.
Yeah.
With like string.
Yes, exactly. It was like, and it looked awesome. And I don't, obviously, like I said, I needed to do that at that time. You know what I mean? Because I needed that level of obsession to see if I could do it. But everything in that book is like on a grid. Everything like makes sense, so to speak, until, like I said, at the end when it starts warping. But I remember him looking at that page, and we were drinking and just hanging out, and he lovingly said it, but he just kind of like laughed and he said, "You're too good to be doing this." You know what I mean? Like basically, like why are you hurting yourself? Why aren't you like trusting your instincts? And I don't even think that he saw it as a moment of wisdom. I think he was just lovingly just kind of ribbing me a little bit.
How
But
did you react in that moment? I'm just curious. I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm just like, what was your response in that moment when he said that to you?
I
Out of
think
curiosity.
exactly what I just said. Like, I
Yeah.
need to get this out of my system. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, I need to do a whole book where it is, to my mind, like mathematically perfect. You know what I mean? Like the pupils will always be the same distance from one another if there's a character straight on, and the character's teeth will always be just this way. I had to figure it out. So, but it did kind of plant seed of like, I don't want to live like this. You know what I mean? I don't want to draw like this forever. And that's usually how I feel kind of by the end of every book. I'll start each book with like a really strong through line. And then I will hate it by the end of it. Be like, I need to break this through line and throw it in the trash and never look at it again. So yeah, that was yeah, I think it's good to get feedback. I remember the first Luther Strode cover, the one that was, Luther Strode issue 1. I literally almost tore it up and threw it away in Savannah. I was so upset about it. And I was like, this sucks. It's trash. And my friends came over and they were like, whoa, calm down. It looks good. Like, you just need to ease up and like take a walk.
Are we talking about this one right here?
It was actually, that was the trade paperback. It
Okay.
was,
This one right here.
that's the one. And
Yeah.
like, I was 21, however old. And so wrapped that up in a work day, hated it. Then we just went out for dinner, had a drink, just had a good night with friends. I come back and I look at it and I'm like, you know what? That's all right. Glad I didn't tear that one up. I didn't go feral on that one. But I think that's why it's good for me to now I work in a studio again. It's good for me to be able to walk away from the work because I will tear it up. I'll get crazy on it. But if I walk away from it and come back the next day, usually all of my misgivings disappear once I give it time. I think you run into, I think again this happens to any person, but it's very evident in art when you're trying to make a thing. You enter into a moment with expectations. And it's very difficult when reality it just takes a fat shit all over your expectations. And you go, oh God, that's not what I wanted at all. And you can't appreciate that sometimes the reality is good too. It's not a dump. It's just something different. And I think that happens a lot with art. You'll have this picture in your brain, this dream image, this person from your dream. Don't you know they're the most beautiful person who's ever lived? And then you go to draw it and you're like, they're hideous.
Who is this? This wasn't in my brain.
Yeah. And then for some reason you hate the drawing and you're also like, do I have bad brains? What's wrong with me? So yeah, I think that's giving yourself time to let reality become reality. And like I said, this isn't unique to art. This is a lot of life experience. You enter a new job, you know what I mean? Even you get like, who feels good about a haircut the day that you get a haircut? You walk home and you're like, I look like Jimmy Neutron and I want to scream. But then you give it a day and you do your thing and you're like, oh, okay, I'm all right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting, and I would never compare Fall Sunrise to an episode of the Oblivion Bar, but what you're saying here in terms of how you feel in the moment, or how when you spend a lot of time on a certain piece, how you feel after stepping away from it is night and day. There'll be times where Aaron and I will do a episode of the Oblivion Bar, and I'll think in the moment as we're recording it or right afterwards, man, we really didn't bring it that time. Like A game was not here today. let's see what I can do in the editing bay. And then like after I go in there and I tinker with it a couple days later and I listen to the final product again, I almost always am like, wow, that actually turned out a lot better than I thought it was going to, right?
It's
And
also that impossible thing of like, whatever it's sometimes your taste and the taste of your audience or friends align. I'd say that happens probably half the time, but then sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's completely out of your hands. Sometimes it's like a David Lynch's Dune situation where he was like, he reviled it and it was like painful for him to talk about, and people would bring it up and he'd be like, I don't want to talk about that. But a lot of people love that movie to death. You know what I mean? I really enjoy that movie. So yeah, I think it's one of those situations as well where sometimes you just gotta do your best, get done with a thing, and then just give it to the world and say like, that ain't mine. That's whatever it is to you. I don't want to pollute that, and I don't want to direct that in any way. Which is actually one of the reasons why I don't do kind of interviews either, because I don't ever want like my own narrative in making a thing to subtract from anyone's personal revelations that were unique to their own experiences. And I feel like sometimes that can happen. I never want to hear a band tell me what songs they've done that they don't like. You know what I mean? Because then I'm like,
Sure.
oh, I love that one. I'm like, don't take that away from me.
Yeah, it's interesting. And actually going into our next question here about Silver Surfer, because I honestly would not forgive myself if I had you here on the show and we didn't talk at least a little bit about Silver Surfer. I had a question about Silver Surfer Black, and it was sort of like my interpretation of what the story meant. And I know there's a lot of tie-in with what was going on with the Guardians and Null at the time and all those things, but like I have a very particular theory on it. And I wanted to integrate that into a question, but I also didn't want you to have to try to explain yourself about what you and Donnie were trying to say. So I altered it slightly. And I want to take people back, listeners, everybody, to San Diego Comic-Con just a few weeks ago. You and I had a chance to finally meet in person, and we sat there and chatted for a moment. And I felt like such a dick because I hate when people do this. I guess I don't hate it, but I give them a side eye when people do this at cons where they will just take up all the time with the creator. Like they'll just sit there and chat with them for a half an hour. Well, like Chris Claremont will be on a third X-Men story and we're all like, come on, man, I'm trying to get my Uncanny X-Men, whatever. So, and I accidentally did that with you. Like I was fortunately one of the first people in line there at Felix's booth to meet you there at San Diego this year. And I took a knee and we chatted about Silver Surfer and this conversation and a couple other things. And I thought, oh my gosh, it has been at least 10 minutes and I have been here way too long. And I at that time it felt great. Like I was almost floating. It felt like when you and I were sitting there chatting, but I didn't want to take up any more time. And one of the questions that I had for you in that moment that we didn't really get to, but you sort of almost loosely answered it in a way there, but I want to sort of noodle on it some more here in this conversation is that, you mentioned during that conversation, your version of Norrin was created not just to sort of emulate the actual physique of Surfer, but there's also some like deliberate effort to design the Surfer as more of like an androgynous being, right? And along with some of initial, design choices you had for the book, I'd love to hear you sort of talk about that maybe initial North Star with you and Donnie for the story of Silver Surfer Black and what you guys were maybe, again, not what the story meant to you, but like when you and Donnie sat down together to talk about this book, what was the common ground for both of you that you really wanted to hit these notes going into it?
Yeah, I think we both, we wanted to make something that felt evergreen. But the reality of the market sometimes is that oftentimes books that aren't connected to the mainline continuity fall to the wayside. So it was one of those things where we were like, okay, how do we make this emotionally a standalone book? How do we get across, this thing that, if in 10 years no one knows who the hell Null is, like, doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And that was kind of our through line, where it's like, okay, right off the bat, let's connect it to the overarching, you know, what's going on in the comic. But like, does it? I kept thinking of Samurai Jack, and how the intro of that show tells you everything you need to know of what is happening, and then they can drop you anywhere.
Yeah.
And they do, and that's what happens in the show. So I was, in terms of getting us there, you know, I was like, oh, let's just do the Samurai Jack thing. Let's just drop him into a black hole. Then we can take the story where we want. Because yeah, at the time I was struggling with, you know, every comic feeling the same to me, and it's like, to a degree, in you know, when you're in a genre, people expect certain things, and you do need to be understanding of that, and you want to fulfill those needs. But you know, like, how do we not turn this into just like punch kick, you know? And I
Sure.
remembered that one growing up that stood out to me that I think succeeded in that was Silver Surfer Requiem. And
Yeah,
I
Assad
felt like,
Ribic and is Assad Ribic and J. Michael Straczynski?
yep.
Yeah.
And I feel like everyone who's like a surfer fan, specifically from like a certain age bracket, that book was big, you know, like emotionally, and it made you realize, like, oh, these, you know, the philosophy of the book doesn't have to bow to crossovers, and it doesn't have to bow to the inevitable fight sequence. It's like, okay, how do we marry these concepts, you know? And I think that was very important for me, because I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know what I mean? I don't want to just do the same fight story, but I felt a little trapped by that.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I think that for me, what I wanted to do was make a beautiful book. And I felt like I been dipping my toes into that in other books, but I think I was a little nervous of it. I think I was a little uh, shy of showing myself at that time and my own taste, you know? I was nervous to express myself in some ways, but with that one, like I said, I was like, I got nothing to lose. I got no, I'm just going in on this. So in every page of that, in every moment, you know, whether it's a poignant moment or whether it's an action or pain, like, I just wanted there to be something beautiful on every page. And I find Surfer beautiful as a, you know, I think we all, there's a reason why the biggest thing that is created in art, you know, over time is, you know, everyone is in love with the human figure. You know what I mean? Either in some way obsessed, whether you're revulsed by it or whether you're obsessed by it. You know what I mean? That as humans, there's an obsession with bodies and with our own species. You know what I mean? And you see it throughout time. So I really wanted to dive into that. I'm like, I have the opportunity to basically draw this beautiful Greco-Roman sculpture 10 times a page for a year, you know? So yeah, that was something more, honestly, like, in a way of like letting the body tell the story. It was like, even if I take all the words out of this, like, do you feel something when you see Surfer here, you know? And I want to take that to all my work, you know, and I want to, that's what I love drawing. And in that, in terms of building like a universal sense of beauty, I like you said, I love androgyny. I find it very beautiful, and I wanted to express that in Surfer, and I wanted to push maybe what people like expected or found normal or strange or accessible or any of that stuff. And I really just believed that if people were able to spend time with it, then they'd like it, And it was a hard push on the front end, admittedly, because people they were nervous about putting it out there because it's a little weird what you're doing. I'm like, trust me, beautiful.
I've heard you talk about this recently.
Yeah.
About how like specifically Marvel was maybe a little nervous about what you and Donnie were doing. I'm just curious, like, do you remember what it took to eventually convince editorial that this is how this needs to be told, this story needs to be told?
Yeah, it was I don't want to speak out of turn on this one, but it was there's a lot of conversations. They, like I said, my style kind of like evolves with each book that I do, and they, basically were expecting one thing and got another. And I think that a lot of people just didn't think it would work. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but basically it's like it was through I literally came into Marvel and fought for the book. It felt like being a student again. It was literally like artwork on the walls, fight for your life. Tell me why this has value. Tell me why this matters. And I did that, and props to them. They listened and they said, all right, you seem really passionate about this. Let's do it. And I'm very glad that it did work, because had it not, I don't know that I would have gotten too many more jobs over there. But
it kind of paved the way for Doctor Strange in a way. Would you agree on that?
Oh, it very literally did. It was once Silver Surfer wrapped up. It was they were basically like, what do you want to do next? And I was like, do I have something for you? So yeah, it was a definitely one thing led to another, very literal way.
Yeah. I think one of the best decisions that Marvel has made over the last decade or longer even is the fact that they've given you not just one, but 2 Treasury size editions of your work. And I'll tell you, it rewards, I think, I'm trying to find a more romantic way to say this, but I think it just rewards to read this Silver Surfer Black and Doctor Strange both. And I would say really any work, but these 2 works specifically, it rewards upon holding it in your hands, right?
Yeah.
Like you can read it digitally and you can totally enjoy it. But I think holding this Treasury edition in your hands, and I'm looking at it as we're talking about it, like there's a scene specifically I'm thinking of where it's when you see Galactus for the first time, he sort of erupts from his cube, and you've got basically you've got Norrin looking up at him, and here it is right here. This scene right here, I think you just cannot breathe this in. You can't drink this scene in.
Yeah,
I think properly without holding it in your hands.
I agree. That was one of the signs of success for me in drawing a page is if I start getting dizzy drawing it, then I know that I did something right. And there was a lot of the perspective pushes that I did on that book, where it's like I'd stare at it for a while and I'd kind of get vertigo a little bit, and I was like, all right, I did good. That's a good. And I also remember that one I try not to in a world where I have infinite time to make a book, I will be coloring it myself as well. So that's what I do for covers and whatnot. And that's what I would like to do moving forward. But it's when I'm working with a colorist that I really respect, I want to give them direction, but I don't want to say too much usually, because I'm the reason why I asked you to be on this book is because I trust you. But with that page in particular, I remember sending Dave, I was like, I want it to look like this. And it was the inks. And I literally just made the whole page red and made Silver Surfer white. And I was like, and he gave me that back. And I said, killed it. 10 out of 10.
No notes.
Give this man a raise. But yeah, it was, I didn't know that it was going to be printed, that Surfer. I didn't know that it was going to be Treasury edition. And that was a fun reveal and a really cool thing to see. And like I said, props to the Marvel crew. It went from being nervous about the book to going actually, we love it.
Yeah.
Printed on a billboard, Um, so it was one of those things that seeing it like that was really cool, but I didn't actually draw it to be that way. You know what I mean? So some of the pages in that are literally like to size. Whereas with Fall Sunrise, I knew that it was going to be Treasury from the get-go. So, I could draw it differently, knowing that, I could really go wild on some of my visual choices because I'm like, oh, this is going to be printed huge. I don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to read at a millimeter tall.
Sure.
So that kind of helped with pushing the different looks of those books. Like I said, there's a lot of reasons why they look very different, but that was one of the decisive factors of like, oh, I know how big this is going to be. So I know how many leaves I'm going to draw on that tree.
One more small question about Silver Surfer, and then we can move on. Do you feel, and again, in hindsight, and you've already mentioned that you don't really like to return to things once you've left them. And I've even heard you talk about how like Surfer was one of those characters that you really wanted to get your hands on as a young person coming up in SCAD and so on. I'm just curious, do you, looking back on Silver Surfer Black all these years later, do you feel like you were able to say what you and Donnie wanted to say in this book the way you wanted to say it?
I think so. I think it was one of those things where it's I'm looking back on it, and the only book that feels fully mine is Fall Sunrise because it's the only one that is fully mine. But looking back on all the books that I've done, I feel expressed. I feel like the collaboration ended up becoming the DNA of the project. I think if I never did Surfer again, I would feel satisfied. I feel like that is a character that I could see myself having another narrative to tell with. But there's nothing that's
I'm holding up my fingers. I'm crossing my fingers, everybody, just so you know what's going on.
I just really love drawing Silver Surfer.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I could push further into a lot of the stuff that I was dipping my toes into there. So yeah, I feel like in that narrative, fully expressed, I do think that I could say more there.
Here's hoping. That's what I'll say. I'll say here's down the road at some point we need more tread more on Silver Surfer. And Tread, I have one final question for you here before I let you go. And you've been so generous with your time. I appreciate you again stopping by. And one thing that I really love about not just you as a creator, but you as a person, is you always are very quick to give credit to your collaborators. Folks like Heather Moore, Justin Jordan, and Clayton Cowles, and Felipe Sabero, like all these folks that you've worked with over your entire career. You're quick to just give them all the praise. And you've mentioned that these collaborations inspire you and are significant towards your growth as an artist. So I'd like to hear more about the people or material or et cetera, things that have been inspiring you recently. So, you're welcome to continue to brag on the crew I just mentioned there, but are there any other comic prose or pieces of work even across any medium here recently that you've just been burning with admiration?
Yeah. I work in a very inspiring studio, for one. My studio mates are Ian Bertram and James Tynan. And,
who?
Yeah, exactly. Who's that guy? Yeah, and Ian is one of my best friends, and we're in that studio every day together. His work is very inspiring, and I think and this goes way back, because when I was working on Silver Surfer, he was working on Little Bird, and that meeting of minds and those sharing of pages, they feel like connected books to me emotionally, just because it was like we were hanging out and sharing pages with each other. And then it happened again, while he was working on Precious Metal, and I was working on Fall Sunrise. It was important to have each other there. So Ian's work is always very inspiring to me. That one stands out, you know, and I think a lot of what James is doing with Tiny Onion, his company, is it's very inspiring in terms of what it could mean for the industry, you know, and in terms of creators supporting creators and offering platforms to people. A person who I collaborate with as well, who's always inspiring to me, named Jensen Ekwall. She did in Fall Sunrise the two kind of like storybook sequence pages, and those were really important to me to have a truly different voice in there, because Jensen typically works in like children's book illustrations, and I felt like that was perfect, kind of like the, you know, the Kill Bill sequence that's an anime, you know what I mean? I needed it to be that different, you know what I mean? And that's part of the beauty of being in New York, is that, you know, you just have people from all different walks of life, you know, creating around you. You know, another friend of mine is animating a video game coming out, Peter Schmidt, and the game is called Cyberlich. And Peter's been showing me this artwork for this game for years, and now it's like finally out there and kind of making waves in the like indie dev community. But I feel like I learned something from all of these people, you know what I mean? Because it's like, where else would I get to see, you know, hand-drawn 2D video game animation and children's book animation, and then Ian doing these huge, you know, like all his pages, like his comic pages are, you know, bigger than a human being half the time, you know what I mean? Much less when he's doing these big, incredible like paintings that he does. Yeah, gosh, there's just so many people out in this community that I'm in that are really inspiring to me. Yeah.
What about work, like books, movies, television, other comics, perhaps? I know it's hard to read comics when you're working in comics sometimes, but like, is there anything else, you know, like something that's really just tickled you, I guess, in a
Yeah,
certain
I'm trying
way?
to think. There's always something that has caught me. This is going because you know, you never know when something's gonna jump out at you. Um, but um, I just started looking at within the past few years was I'm new to a little comic called Prince Valiant, and
Okay.
turns out it's awesome and the
Yeah.
artwork's amazing. So that's been a fascination of mine, and I've been like, oh my god, did we peak early? Did like has anyone drawn better than Foster? Like I don't know. I don't know that we've done better than that. So that was inspiring to me. I feel bad. I don't. I can't remember the name of the creator, but I read someone gave me. It's kind of like a manga size thing, but it's Western drawing. It's called The Princess and the Dressmaker, or the Prince and the Dressmaker, and it was a really just cute, sweet, well made comic that felt very. I want to say there's
Was it
even
Jen Wang?
Jen Wang. Yes, that book was
Yeah.
great. Really loved that book, and I feel like it's like a good. Yeah, I feel like it can work for all ages, but I feel like specifically for like teens and whatnot,
Yeah.
it would really do well.
If you liked that one, Jen also has a really great book called Ash's Cabin from First Second that is really great as well.
Well, because I think that one is first, second as well.
Mhm.
I can't remember,
Could
but
be.
yeah, no, I was that one came out of nowhere. Someone like gave it to me,
Yeah.
and I was just so. It's one of the first comics that in a long time I've just kind of like accidentally read cover to cover. You know what I mean? It's been a minute since I like sat down and tore through a book. There's always more. I went on a big in terms of reading, I just love nights, and I went through a big reading Arthurian legend over the past couple years. So almost all of my reading has just been uh Lancelot and Percival and all these things. So, you know, there's never any telling what's
Sure.
what's gonna inspire you in these moments.
That's true. That's very true. You did Symphony of the Night, Castlevania Symphony of the Night poster from Mondo not too
Yeah.
long ago. And my gosh, like the fact that I missed out on that, I will never forgive myself. The fact that I can't find that now in the aftermarket, I'm so bummed because
Oh,
that is one of I mean, of a catalog of things that you've done really well, that I
mhm.
think just immediately it was like I have to have that at some
That
point in my
one,
life.
if I get extras, you're first on the list,
Oh, yes.
for sure. But yeah, no, that one was personal. That was
Yes.
it was I feel like in terms of, I don't have the opportunity much in, you know, my life presently to play games, but they were just such a huge part of my life for so long.
That PlayStation cover is like cigarette burned into my
It's
brain.
burnt, and it's like that all of her artwork. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it, but Ayami Kojima.
Mhm.
Um, she was just so influential to my work, and also to just like, my perception of beauty, in her work, where it's like that I want people to look like that, you know. And so to have the opportunity, where it was already something that I've been kind of like extrapolating on for my entire career, where it's like
Sure.
basically if I had a question of like, how do I make a person look beautiful, I would look at either her work or Yoshitaka Amano, Final
Uh-huh.
Fantasy artist.
Yes.
And I just like have books from both of them. Like, I don't know how to draw this nose. How did Amano do it? All right, I'll do it like that. um, so yeah, that, you know, that character design, everything about Symphony of the Night is likewise burnt into me. So I knew I had to bring my A game on that one. So
Yeah. And you did. I mean, it's awesome. And,
thank you.
you know, Trad, I'm going to let the facade fade away. Okay. Here it goes. My journalistic integrity is going out the window, and I'm just going to full on fanboy for about. Can you give me 20 seconds? And I'm just going to
You
fanboy.
can have as many
Okay.
as you need.
I know you have like, I've heard you talk about this before, that you don't really love this sort of hero obsession. Is that the
Mhm.
correct way to say it? Right. But what I'm about to say to you is probably going to make you uncomfortable, but truthfully, you are just one of my all-time favorite voices in comics. And when I think of the greats, truly like the greats, those creators that have like the singular voice of their era and whose legacy will outlive me, you, everyone listening to this conversation right now, Tradmore, I think, should be in that conversation with, Alex Toth, Mobius, Jack Kirby, among other greats, right? That I just can't list right now because we need to close this conversation out. But the medium is unquestionably more interesting today because of the work that you've contributed to it, and you'll hopefully contribute to for years to come. So the last thing I'll say, I'll stop. Okay, facade back. All right, journalistic is. I'm here. Here I am. I just feel great.
I don't think they are. I don't think they have to be separate. I think you did. It's all you, and you do
Yeah.
it great.
I don't really do a great job of hiding my fanboy in general, but it was something that I had to get over really quickly here on the podcast because I'm interviewing so many incredible people, like on a regular basis. I don't know why they keep letting us talk to folks like you, but they do, and therefore I have to come at this with some kind of integrity and be like, I'm here to ask you questions, not tell you how much I love your work. But I guess I could do both. But there's that line, I guess. But truthfully, I feel so grateful to have the opportunity to sit down with you today and chat here on the Oblivion Bar podcast. And I will quite literally jump at the first opportunity that I get to have you here on the show again when your availability or interest pops up again.
I love it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's tough to take in that much kindness at once, but I'm doing my best, and I hope you know.
I just love bombed you.
Yeah, I'm very grateful and very gracious for this conversation and for your enthusiasm, and it means a lot. Yeah, let's chat again. Let's do it. When am I coming out with my next book? I don't know.
Well, let me ask you, and I'm not trying to mine you for any information, but to sort of close us out, is there anything? I know you're not on the socials. You don't have a Substack like most creators. I feel like here's another thing that I really love about being a fan of Tradmore is that in order to keep up with what you're doing, you have to sort of intentionally seek it out, and I love that. But two-part question to close us out. Is there a way for people to follow your career in some way? And also, is there anything that you can sort of either tease or even just say about what you're working on? And of course, if you can't or don't want to, please don't feel pressured. I'm just curious.
I do like that, like you said, I do like making making people work for it a little bit. I do like so basically, yeah, if you want to, I post up my work on my dang website like an old person, and I love it because I feel like I'm bothered by all the platforms for lots of reasons, but one of them just being a very basic thing of like content issues. You know what I mean? Where I'm just like, God, like I'm gonna draw new people. Come on, I'm an artist. What do you think I'm doing over here? And I'm going to put it into the world. So yeah, if you check in on my website, you'll probably find new things on there, and I'll probably sneak little things on there. I love using dead platforms. If you're still on Tumblr or Flickr, you can find me there.
Yeah. Trad, can I be in your top 4 on MySpace, please?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Wait till you read my live journals. They're scathing. Yeah. In terms of what I'm doing next, I don't know that I can talk about some of those things, or that I'm ready to work on another creator-owned thing. It's not set in stone, but that's where my heart is, and that's where I feel like the next step is for me. But it's so early on that it's not like I'm not like hiding something behind my back, like, ooh, here it is. It truly is like a thing of like, I think that's what's next for me. I'm working on, I don't even know if I can say this, but I guess I will. I'm working on a little short thing that I'm writing, drawing, coloring, lettering, a little short story over at Skybound right now. So y'all will find out what that is whenever it's allowed to be said, but it's gonna be cool.
Yeah.
And it's gonna look really pretty. So that'll be out. So I'll have something on the shelves within the next months, foreseeably. But until then, yeah.
Well, again, get on MySpace. Make sure you guys check out Trad's Zanga if you still know what that website is.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, have y'all heard of LimeWire? You can get music for free.
That's right. Well, Trad, again, what an honor, what a privilege. Again, would love to have you back on at some point. But until then, great chatting with you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you again. This has been great. And yeah, let's talk again soon. I'll try not to hide from the world so often.